It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this. Welcome to the Game Mess Show live. I'm Jeff Grubb. I write for GamesBeat.com. I also run the Game Mess on Twitter. And now I run the Game Mess on my Discord. And but by that, I mean, I'm going to start housing the list, Game Mess list, if that's what you came here for. I'm going to start housing that in a channel on my Discord server where I will update it. And if you have like your own Discord server, you'll be able to subscribe to this because it's an announcement channel. And whenever I post new updates to the list, which I'll try to do like around once a week at least, you'll get that announcement in your server, and everyone can share it from there. That's up and running right now. The Discord link should be in the description of my Twitter bio. Yes, that's the best way. If you're on Twitch right now and you're watching on Twitch, the best way to get that is just go to twitter.com/JeffGrubb, click on the link there, join it, it's free. And then if you're watching on YouTube later, of course, the link is in the description. Okay, how's it going, everybody? So we got chat, but I think what we're gonna do first is let's go to the list. Actually, you know what? I'm not even on the right list. There we go. All right, there we go. So here is the updates. There's not a lot to talk about. There's a few things that I wanted to touch on. Most notably, April 21st, very free to play. So I'm pretty sure that's coming up very soon. I think this week we should be switching from Xbox Live Gold being required for free to play games to that coming down. I don't know for sure. This is something I heard secondhand, and then I was kind of maybe able to confirm it one way or the other. But I'm pretty sure that's going to be. This is happening soon, one way or the other. I think it's this week though, so that'll be nice. It'll be a nice little thing where people no longer have to have Xbox Live Gold to play Fortnite, Apex Legends, things like that. We should be hearing about that soon. Now, right now, as I'm doing this, I think I'm pretty sure Microsoft is going with its GameStack live stream. If not now, it's starting in about an hour. And they'll have some news there, but it's mostly about their GameStack and their tech side and stuff for developers. It'll be very technical, but they'll also talk in platitudes about their services and what that stuff means. But there will be a little bit of news out of there, nothing too major. I mean, nothing like, new game announcements. Obviously, it's not going to be that stuff. This stuff is facing towards developers, and it's for them. And there will be some good news for them in that stuff, and that should be happening today. Let's see. I think that I wanted. Someone finally reminded me. I think Canoed in the Discord got mad at me. I kept putting this Final Fantasy Digital Fan Fest, and it is called the Final Fantasy 14 Digital Fan Fest. Now I've corrected myself and said it is. Yeah, it's focused on Final Fantasy 14, but Final Fantasy 14 is in the name, so it's definitely focused on that. Oh my God, they're fighting real bad. Hang on. You know what? This happens all the time. We're just gonna have to deal with it. All right, let's see. So where was I? Okay, so other than that, there's not a lot happening with the list. I think there's not a ton of big updates. I guess Ubisoft Forward gave us their day, but we knew they were going to be part of the E3 digital edition. So them saying that they're doing their thing on June 12th. All right, so we know something's happening on the first day, but we still know that like Nintendo, Xbox, Capcom, Take-Two, Warner Brothers, Konami, and Koch. I'm still not sure how to say that Koch Media one. They'll all have their stuff within those days as well. I imagine during like the first couple of days. Maybe Nintendo goes last because they used to do that. They used to go on the last day, and then E3 proper would start. So maybe they maintain that schedule. And I, like I was saying last time, we can expect full showcases from all these companies, them to really kind of bring a full E3 experience, stuff that they were going to do anyhow. Now they're just doing under the E3 umbrella. Ubisoft sort of confirming that as well, in addition to Microsoft and Nintendo doing that last week. And really, I think we can expect that from all these companies. So, and there's a good question in chat real quick. When will Sony go? I still don't know. Last year around this time, I was starting to hear that they were going to do something in June. But I haven't heard one way or the other on that, but we'll find out for sure soon. And I'll answer more questions here at the end. So a couple things I want to talk about. There was from this show last week, I answered a question about Gear 6, and that like broke yesterday on Twitter. Someone posted a clip of that, and it was me saying that Gear 6 won't be there because Microsoft has too much going on. And I wanted to like update and clarify that. So the idea isn't like, Gear 6 is ready to show, but Microsoft has too much, so they couldn't possibly fit Gear 6 into there. I think my point was more that Gear 6 is still pretty early. They're not going to show it, and they're not in a situation where if they don't have enough, and so they're just going to like say, okay, let's just say we're working on Gear 6 so that people know that's coming to fill in this presentation so it feels like we have stuff. They're not in that situation. It's not like, oh, they have games coming out of their eyeballs. A lot of the stuff they've announced is stuff that is coming, but still years away. And that stuff is all stuff we know about. Might do some updates on that. But I wouldn't expect necessarily a ton of new game announcements from Microsoft at E3. I think that might be a pretty far-fetched. It's going to be stuff that we know about or stuff that we're expecting. Like Forza Horizon 5, I think is still one that I'm going to continue saying I think is going to happen. And it's going to be that sort of new game announcement where we know that game is in the works. We just haven't heard it officially said, and they'll kind of talk along those lines. But for Microsoft, they will have a lot of Halo. They probably will talk about Starfield. There'll be stuff in between. We heard this week Double Fine talking about Psychonauts 2 and saying that's definitely still coming this year. So they'll probably talk about that at that time. And they'll then, maybe a few surprises, but stuff like Stalker 2 will probably be in there, like those indie games and the smaller games that Microsoft's publishing or supporting. And then, of course, stuff that like Jez Corden from Windows Central has been teasing, the swirl thing that'll likely be there if they manage to sign the deal with Kojima. That will probably be there. That all depends on whether or not that deal gets closed in time, of course. So they'll have a lot of stuff, and they don't need to necessarily rush Gear 6 ahead and just say, let's put a logo on the screen, or let's make a cinematic trailer and just say this game that people know is probably going to come eventually. We don't want to say that's happening yet. We can hold off and focus on other stuff and wait on Gear 6 until we're more ready. I think another big topic I wanted to talk about is I would expect probably Microsoft to make more deals along the lines of Outriders and MLB The Show, stuff that they might show at E3. I think that the Outriders experiment worked fantastically. So when we recorded this last week, we knew that Outriders managed to get a pretty big audience. It attracted a lot of players, especially on Game Pass. It also seemed to be selling very well. We saw that on Steam. And I think now that we have the MPD numbers for that game, and it's like a small sample, like the game came out, I think at the beginning of April, the very end of the MPD reporting period for March. And yet it still was number 3 on the chart overall. And more importantly, though, the game was number 3 on the PlayStation platform best-selling, like top 10 best-selling games. And then also number 3 on the Xbox platform best-selling games. Now, you have to take into account that doesn't say how many games were sold, like, just flatly. And it doesn't take into account like the variation in install base between PlayStation and Xbox. But still, to be number 3 on both platforms suggests that the Outriders experiment worked extremely well. It worked so well that it just didn't seem to have any obvious negative effects, and only seems to have had significant positive effects. And I think we're probably going to see the same thing with MLB The Show. That's going to be a big deal. And with these games coming out and having hard numbers that Microsoft could take to developers and publishers and partners and say, hey, it worked and it works so well. Look at this evidence. I think that's going to help Microsoft in negotiations when they're having these conversations with more companies. Now, I don't think that means that, like, there's always been this rumor about Resident Evil Village. I don't think that's very realistic. Excuse me. Microsoft has probably had those conversations. I think Microsoft has had a lot of conversations, but the idea that, like, a couple weeks out, Microsoft's going to be able to announce this and actually make that happen. Maybe they would love to. I'm skeptical that they were going to be able to convince Capcom between now and launch to make it happen. But that doesn't mean other games are like off the table. I think that they could make that same deal happen with other big games coming this year. I think the big one that makes the most sense to me, this is not a scoop or anything. This is just me, coming up with theorizing about what would make sense, and that is Battlefield 6. Battlefield 6 is a game that is launching in an environment where it's very different than its last couple of games. Fortnite is taking over. Free-to-play shooters are not just big on console; they are now huge not just big on PC. They are also huge on console, and making a game like that work at full price is possible. Call of Duty does it, but Battlefield 5 really struggled. And I think that the game could struggle even more, even if it's very good, just because the audience for shooters has changed. And one way you could fight against that is to make the game free to play, or parts of it free to play. And if you don't do that, now another avenue that you could take that seems to work very well is make a deal with Microsoft, put it in Game Pass, and from day one, get that huge audience, get that bump of a lot of people playing your multiplayer game. The people who don't want to get Game Pass yet can buy the game now. They know they'll have a bunch of friends to play with because a bunch of people are playing it on Game Pass. It could make a huge difference for that game. And so to me, it makes a lot of sense for everyone involved. And that's why I would expect it to maybe happen. Okay, last thing, PlayStation reversed that store decision. That was, I think, it was a surprise, but also it's not too much of a surprise. I think back in November, I wrote a story saying that it's okay to not panic about your PS5 and your Xbox Series X. And the gist of that story was these companies are listening. They do understand things that are like the shortcomings that they've of the consoles. Launching things underbaked, and they will address these things. And if you make enough noise, they're going to respond because they know how much money is on the table. They want people to feel good about these consoles. This is in relation to the other story I wrote just like last week about Jim Ryan and how he needs to tell a better narrative about regarding the PlayStation. And that's because when people spend a lot of money on something, they want to tell themselves a story about why they're happy they have it, even in between big game releases. That stuff's pretty important, especially in like a tight-knit community like gaming, where we are relatively small and we're very loud and very passionate. Having like a lot of like good news helps. That Microsoft realized that's why they are relentless, even without a lot of first-party games. They're relentlessly hitting us with good news because it's helping people feel good about the big purchase they made or the big purchase they plan to make with buying a console. And so. Now, Sony, I think, has realized this. They do know this. And while they haven't been as relentless as Microsoft, I do think, in general, they are on the ball and they know how much money is on the line. And so when Jim Ryan sees people react negatively and they're like, let's do the math, like we could eliminate this story if we just reverse this decision for the most part and still close the PSP store, but not close the PS3 and Vita store, not yet at least. And I think it's obviously the right call, and it's the right call because it helps them tell this better story of we are listening, and if this is important to you, then it's important to us, and we care about these games too, even if like it seems like clearly that they didn't necessarily care about these games, but they could say no, actually, you know what, the fact that you guys care makes us care, and that means it's okay for you to care again, and it's kind of this this cycle that can feed on itself and keep them going. So that was the big stuff I wanted to talk about today. I know I talked a lot and very fast, but that's Jeff Grubb. I'm sorry. Jeff Grubb's run hot. That's how we go. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's hop into the questions. Let's go here. Oh, you know what? I got a couple YouTube questions I want to answer first. So this one is from Nintendo Derek. He says, and this is from the video last time. If you want to ask a question on YouTube, put it in the comments. I'll try to pick a couple for each week to answer. This is from Nintendo Derek. Good to see you addressing YouTube comments. My question is, what kind of older ports are you expecting or would you like to see for Switch? I'd love to see some Arkham or Time Splitters or even the Force Unleashed on Switch, but really I'm curious about anything at this point. It seems like they've been doing a really good job. I mean, I think honestly any port could do pretty well on Switch. People love to buy games on Switch. That thing has a massive attach rate with people buying 10, 15 games for the system per year or something like that, something wild like that, on the high end. And so any sort of port seems like it has a chance to be worth the time of any company that might want to do it. I think that's what Aspire has realized. And that's why they've done a lot of ports to Switch. And I expect that to continue. So what would I like to see? I think for me, it has been and will be until we get it, the Igavania, Castlevania games, those Metroidvania ones for the Game Boy Advance and the DS. I mean, honestly, if Konami wants to put each of those out for like $15 to $20 each, I would buy each and every one. If they want to put it out as a collection, I would be grateful and I would buy it in an instant and I would be so grateful. I'd be so happy. Like, I want to play those games on Switch so bad. I just want to have them all in a good collection that is very easy to access. And it's not like me setting up an emulator to play it and then, forgetting about it or then going back to it and then like not remembering I have my quick save set up and then overriding my quick save and then losing my save. And, emulating's, I love to do it. I emulate games all the time. I think it's a great way to experience old games. You shouldn't hesitate. You shouldn't feel bad about it. You shouldn't think you have to go out and buy $100 cartridges or whatever if you want to play old games. Like, experiencing gaming's past is important, and I think you should take any avenue to do it that is available to you. But emulating is very much a thing where it's like it is sort of nebulous. And if you do lose your quick save, it's very easy to end up like, oh man, I have to start the game over. This is a bummer. And I think putting it in an official format on Switch would eliminate those problems for me, and I'd be very happy with that. All right, I got one more YouTube question. from David Weinholt. What's the biggest acquisition you think Xbox could make going forward? I think Valve would be. And he says that would be it would unify Steam and the Xbox PC store, and that would be huge. Making your Steam games playable on Xbox console would also be huge. Listen, this is within the realm of possibility, I suppose. But I think that the much more realistic outcome for Valve, if Gabe Newell is like, okay, I'm out, and therefore it's time to do something else with the ownership of this company, that the more likely scenario is they would make it go public. They would make the company public. It would raise a lot of money by going public. It would be a pretty big IPO, and they wouldn't have to worry about negotiations. They wouldn't worry about having to sell to Microsoft after Gabe Newell left Microsoft. And honestly, I think they would get more money going public than from a private sale. That doesn't mean it's not possible. I think that it would be very expensive. It would raise up issues of a monopoly, because it's now the biggest OS maker owns the biggest platform for distributing games. And now if you don't work well with Microsoft, then the chance of you making a game that could succeed on PC is zero effectively. And therefore, Microsoft gets to pick winners and losers. So if they make any decision that might keep your game off the store, they are now deciding, pretty single-handedly that your game cannot find a market. And I think that's a risk. I think this would be a risk for Microsoft, open them up to potential lawsuits or regulation. But again, that's if they would even have the chance to buy it. I honestly think Gabe Newell would just make it go public, step back, and just cash out, and that would be a lot easier for them. Okay, so that means I want to go to questions from the chat. So if you want to ask me questions in chat, the best way to do it is to @ me. It helps me spot it. Or of course, if you do like give bits or anything like that, it'll put this on this feed over here, of course. But you don't have to do that. This is free question time. Feel free to just @ me. Also, thank you to Cardinal for the Prime subscription. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And just like to let YouTube know, last time I cut off the question a second early. I don't plan to do that this time. I'm going to try to include all of the questions in the YouTube version as well, unless we start getting off topic. And then at that point, I'll cut it off, and then I'll talk to Twitch about movies or whatever at that point. But otherwise, all the questions about video games should be in the video as well. So let's take a look here. This one is from No One Hangistan. Persona at Xbox/PC at E3. That seems like that seems right. Like if that deal's coming and it's not something that we hear about before E3, yeah, that would be a pretty big deal. That's the kind of thing where you are filling out that E3 presentation with something that is both different and exciting and indicative of like a bigger move of like, oh, Persona on Xbox or Xbox Game Pass. And so it's the kind of thing that like registers on the meter. If you're the person putting together Microsoft's E3 and you're trying to figure out like what should we include, I think that one registers high enough on the meter that you say, yeah, we could hold that for E3 and make a big splash at that point. Also, it's like, I think E3 is going to be an inflection point for Microsoft where they think about this as a chance to get a lot of Xbox Game Pass subscriptions right now. And then every E3, we can time it so that as people's like year subscription, or as they're like looking around saying, oh, do I need to upgrade or whatever, or do I need to, re-up the sub? You can come back a year later and say, here's another crop of games that are coming up very soon that you can feel good about subscribing to, and get more people, but also convince people that already subscribed to maintain a subscription. Let's see. From Sir Mammothly, will you add Square Enix to the E3 part of your Game Mess list? They confirmed they were being part of E3 about 2 to 3 hours ago. I will. Thank you, Sir Mammothly. I'll add them and make sure they're in there for next week. Good looking out. From Michael Gulliver, is Final Fantasy VII Remake likely to actually come to Xbox, and are likely to get Mario Galaxy 2? So Final Fantasy VII Remake on Xbox, it's probably going to happen eventually. Maybe. I mean, I personally am skeptical of it happening this year. I think that Square and PlayStation have only made their partnership like closer and more grand, obviously with Final Fantasy 16. And I think part of that is likely, that part of that could have been expanding the scope of the limited time release for exclusivity for Final Fantasy VII Remake on PlayStation. Now, I think we heard originally it was only going to be a year, and then it expired, and we still haven't heard anything. I think they may put it on PC this year, but the idea of it coming to Xbox this year to me seems less likely. Maybe next year. I could be wrong about that though. To be clear, this is me guessing. And about Mario Galaxy 2 on Switch, I think if they were going to do it, they would have done it. I don't think they're going to do it, and I think they're not going to do it because it has the motion controls for Yoshi's tongue, and I don't think they want to do the work to figure out how to switch that over to a controller. I think they could do it. I think it's just enough work that they don't actually want to go through the effort of making that possible. I know that sucks. I think they should, but I don't think they will. From Rogformer, asking Splinter Cell, how's it going, Raj? I am hopeful, but continually less. I don't want to get my hopes up too high for Splinter Cell. I haven't heard. I've heard that they're always thinking about it, always working on it, but all the reasons why they haven't done it up to this point still exist, and those reasons are: it is not an expansive open world game that they find creative ways to add microtransactions to, or that people will play for long periods of time with high engagement that enables them to keep the price high for a relatively long time. It is the kind of game that they make and they release, will play, and then they put it down and never touch it again. Now, there was always the great Splinter Cell multiplayer modes that some people got very into, but those were never huge. There was a dedicated small audience that loved those things, but it never had the wide-reaching audience and base that they sort of want at Ubisoft. All those reasons why they don't do it still exist. That means they're probably still looking for a creative way to make sure that they can get the most out of this. Now, of course, one way they could do it is partner with Microsoft, put it on Xbox Game Pass. I'm skeptical of that, but I suppose it's possible. And Ubisoft has made similar deals like that with Nintendo for Mario plus Rabbids. Microsoft could say, hey, let's do the same thing with us and Splinter Cell and bring it exclusive to Xbox or Xbox Game Pass, or we'll at least publish it so that it definitely comes out on Xbox Game Pass. But if you want to release it elsewhere, that's fine. I could see that happening. It's just any sort of publishing deal would be it would have to be published by Ubisoft. I don't think that would be part of Xbox Global Publishing, and I think that might make the stations or the negotiations more difficult, but it's still possible. I'm hopeful, but not too hopeful. From Curtis Jason, are the rumors about the next Battlefield being only on next gen true? I don't know. I'll look into that. I haven't actually asked about that. I think that is unlikely, but if that's the case, then I think it's definitely on Game Pass. Because otherwise it's gonna really struggle to get an audience. But I'll look into that. From Nick Turbo, are you celebrating 420? It is legal there. I have 2 small children running around, and it's only me right now because my wife is at work. So at the moment, I am not celebrating 420. I feel too guilty and anxious with the kids around. So it's been kind of a couple years where not a 420 celebrating happening, unfortunately. But yeah. From Nathan Drake 101st, Jeff, why Battlefield on Game Pass if Halo is there? Is Halo getting delayed? Say yes. Yes. No, I don't know. You can just cut that clip out though, and that'll be bad. But yeah, why Battlefield and Halo serve different audiences. Battlefield and Halo can be, I think, complementary. It's not like the Battlefield Titanfall Call of Duty situation where Titanfall gets left behind. I think that, especially if they are a month or so apart in their release, if that happens, you could release Battlefield on Game Pass, get a huge shooter audience very excited, and then have Halo there as well. And then I think both those games could easily coexist on a service like that. You probably wouldn't want too many more massive shooters, but I think 2, and one in the modern military genre and the others in the sci-fi military genre. 2 very different things, of course. I think those could coexist next to each other. But again, this is not me confirming Battlefield is going to be in Game Pass. It's just the reason I think it makes sense. And if it doesn't, of course, that makes sense too. EA wanting to maintain its high price and wanting people to have to pay for the game. of course that makes sense too. So it could go either way, and probably still leans towards them not being in Game Pass. I could just easily imagine it. It makes sense to me. All right. From Rast 1999, Final Fantasy 16 coming 2022. I think that's the plan right now. I think that at Square Enix, I believe that is their intention. How that actually pans out, we'll have to wait and see. I think there's just as good a chance that they feel like, hey, we can delay this for at least 6 months, and that pushes it into 2023 or whatever. But I think that game is getting close to the point where they are feeling good about 2022. From Intersect, he asks, do you know something about the swirl game just teased, and could you add more to the puzzle without spoiling? I do know, and I believe I know. I told Jez that I know, and that I confirmed with him that I wasn't going to swoop this, because I believe he didn't tell me anything, but I believe that he knows more than I do based on the way that he's spoken about it. And I only found out about it after sniffing around because of him. So I don't feel comfortable going out there and like spoiling too much of it, especially because it's not the kind of game where if I were to just tell you what it is, it's not going to mean a lot to you, and you're not going to get it's not going to help you. The excitement about it right now is equivalent to what the excitement you would feel if I told you all the details. And so why would I tell you all the details when I could just let the company do that? That's kind of where I'm at with that game. Adding more to the mystery though, I would, it's like, people look at the emoticon, the emoji, the swirl, and they're like trying to figure out what it looks like and comparing it to other things. And don't try to like do that. It's much more simpler of a code than that. But that's what I'll say about that. And I'll say that we'll probably hopefully find out in a couple months. That feels like the kind of thing that should be at E3 as well. But I haven't heard for sure. Microsoft hasn't like definitively planned their E3 showcase quite yet. They're in the process of doing that. So are all the companies involved with E3. See, from Hawkshot, come on, Jeff, heard anything about Elden Ring? No need for anything concrete. Asking if you've heard anything interesting lately. Still the same thing. The last thing I heard is that Bandai Namco was cracking down on the leaks, and that they were doing that because of the leaks and because of an intention to prepare to announce the game officially. But that's what I heard. I don't know. It's been some time. I still think E3 makes sense. Buy E3 makes sense. Bandai Namco hasn't said it's part of the official E3. I don't know if they would want to do that. But yeah, that's the last thing I heard, and that hasn't changed. So I'm still pessimistic. I'm just gonna keep saying that. That's the best thing to say about Ring. See, from Riser777, what do you think Phil Spencer was hitting at by placing Sekiro from Software on his shelf? From Software make a game for Microsoft, or maybe Sekiro will be added to the Game Pass. I think From Software games ending up in Game Pass makes some sense, but I think that's there because they are in negotiations still to try to get that Elden Ring co-marketing deal, and maybe that means Elden Ring shows up in Game Pass. Maybe I'm not sure how From would react to that as a possibility. I think be looking at Outriders, they'd be like, "This is okay. Yeah, I see that this works for Outriders, but we know that we have an audience that will pay for our game day one as much as we charge for it. So we're going to take advantage of that first, and then maybe we'll talk to you about that." But I think at the very least, Microsoft is having conversations with From Software about co-marketing deals for Elden Ring, and maybe that's what that is alluding to. That's happening. That is happening. Those conversations are happening. If whether or not that's what the shelf is directly pointing to, I don't know if Phil necessarily thinks about it like that. Like, this clue means exactly this thing. It is, hey, I know that I'm talking to From Software right now. Let's go put something from Software up there. And that's about as much thought as he put into it. I mean, he's clearly teasing with us, but I don't think it's like, it's not a Da Vinci novel or, the Da Vinci Code. It's not like a perfect sort of put together like madman coming up with this code for you to look at and be like, if you could just figure everything out, you're going to know exactly what is happening. It's not that clean. It's much more messier than that. It's still just a guy putting stuff on his shelf and having fun with us. And I think that's kind of the way you should think about a lot of these things. Let's see how we've been going for about 30 minutes. Let's definitely, we'll go about 10 more minutes at least, and then we'll start wrapping up. From Wolf Fox, he asks, they ask, I'm sorry, Konami, Castlevania, and Metal Gear Solid Rising trademark renewals, do we get hyped or business as usual? You know, trademark renewals are something that you probably shouldn't read too much into. I guess it's Konami, all those things happening at once. I guess all those things happening at once tell me that there was a lawyer whose job is to make sure that those trademarks are in a solid position to go in there and renew those to make sure that they're good to go. And they just want to get all that work done at one time. That's what that says to me. But we do know that Konami is slightly more interested in games again. They're still coming to E3. That didn't mean much last year. That meant that Contra Rogue Core, I think it was, that the bad Contra. So does it mean something similar this year? I think it's very likely that we'll just be disappointed with what Konami does at E3 as well. And that these trademarks won't turn into anything. But that doesn't necessarily mean, that's not necessarily the case. The easygoing gamer. When do you think we will get Final Fantasy 16 info? I think we'll get it at E3. I do. Square Enix announced, I guess, a couple hours ago. I looked into that. Someone chat, Sir Mammoth was telling me that they announced that, so I'll put that on the list. I expect them to talk about that at E3. You know, when a publisher goes to E3, they can't necessarily look and say, oh, if this game is like so far away that we shouldn't talk about it. They've announced Final Fantasy 16. They need to fill out an E3 showcase. I think they talk about it at E3. Chris Canberg, thank you for your Prime subscription. That means a lot to me. Thank you so much for doing that. And good looking out. All right, let's keep answering some questions. From Ashuto's Kid. Will Microsoft overhaul their Microsoft Store and Game Pass app for P? That was the report out of Windows Central today, that they're going to overhaul Microsoft Store and Game Pass on PC. I think they need to. I think they need to make it as easy as possible. It should be like the lowest barrier to entry that they could possibly make it. Game Pass on PC should be much bigger than what it is. They've done a good job just recently of adding a lot of games, and yet people still want to buy their stuff on Steam because it's what they're used to. And diverting people from what they're used to something that is cheaper should be easy. But what are the barriers there? Well, if it's annoying to use, I'm not even want to think about it. Like, this is hassle to me. I'm already used to and happy buying my games on Steam. I'm just going to keep doing that. So you have to fight those impulses, and the way to fight against those impulses is to make it a very good experience. Microsoft should be much better at this than they are. And, you know, things that make it a bad experience is like anytime that it has any sort of authentication issues and the things break or games won't start, all that stuff needs to go away. I think they have the Bethesda launcher team at, like, you know, within Microsoft now. This is a company that's used to making a specific, you know, launchable store. Maybe bring in some expertise from them, have them focus on it. I don't know if that's something they'll do, but it makes some sense to me. But Microsoft has a lot of people working on these products, so they should just kind of get it right, and it should happen fast. And it sounds like it's going to happen before the end of the year. From Getty614, you think Forza Horizon 5 announcement will be at E3, or do you think there's a chance it could be soon? I think it'll be at E3. That's so they're not going to make any sort of game announcement like that before E3. They're going to get pretty quiet about that level of game announcement until June. And at June, I think if they have a game of that level, they're going to want to have it at E3. They want to make a big splash. They want to make it a good show. They are going to have a dearth of big surprise new announcements, I believe. And they're not going to talk about stuff like years and stuff. So they've already announced a lot of games. So so coming up and updating us about games they've already announced is going to be inherently less exciting than here is, you know how it is with like wrestling. Wrestling's a good example here with WWE. WWE's in the pits, it stinks, whatever. But then you watch Royal Rumble and they bring someone back and it's a surprise. And they, you know, it's like getting a sequel getting announced. Like, you get the big pop, you're very excited about it. And if that doesn't turn into anything, which it almost never does, those wrestlers almost always like stop working for the company again, like a few months later, or they barely ever show up again, or sometimes they never show up again. It doesn't matter. They're putting on a show. They want to make sure that the show has big pops. I think that Microsoft's not going to have a lot of those returning wrestlers to like make people like go crazy and stuff. That stuff's just going to be sort of missing. So they're going to have to rely on stuff that we know is coming and show us more of that. And then if they do have a small surprise like Forza Horizon 5, and I call it a small surprise because everyone should know that they're working on that game, of course. The last one did very well. Microsoft, the people at Microsoft like those games a lot. Playground's very good at making them. They have multiple teams. So we know that's coming. It's just a matter of when. And it would be a small surprise because they've already announced next Forza Motorsport. And so if this game is getting announced and also getting announced that it's coming before Forza Motorsport, that's like, oh, that's a cool, like, sleight of hand trick that they did there. That could make an impact at E3. So it makes sense to show it there. All right, I'm going to try to do a little bit quicker with these answers going forward. Let's see. Scarecrow, was there any truth to the Square Enix acquisition and they just had to deny it since they're traded publicly? Well, there was truth to it to the point where what Square Enix said was denial. That would be like lying to shareholders, and that would be worse. So I would look at exactly the way that Square Enix worded the denial, and it was to the effect of there are no offers right now, like that sort of thing. And I bet it's very true that there are no actual offers, like legally submitted offers to acquire Square Enix on the table. I think the reason that this story happens is because people are always talking about buying everything. And I bet there's always companies saying, how much would it cost to acquire Square Enix? And then let's go ask them about that. And those conversations could happen with no offer on the table. And what Square Enix said would be exactly true. And I think Square Enix, from Square Enix's point of view, I think it's fair to come out and frame the denial in that way to say there is no thing on the table. There's no offer on the table because those conversations about acquisitions happen all the time. And so to say like, just be like, oh yeah, someone asked us about our price. That would almost feel like closer to market manipulation because that happens so often that making a big deal out of it would feel like, wait, are you just inflating your price? Because you know that if you are in acquisition talks, that automatically your price starts going up, which is what we saw. And so to like stand down and say, and to frame it in the way they did seems like the responsible thing to do. It also seems like the truth. I think it's probably just from Yameto, when do you think we'll see the next PlayStation showcase, after E3 or before E3? And should we expect a big one? I think we'll probably get it like just before E3. That's my guess. I guess it all just depends on how PlayStation's feeling about that. But I would expect it to be just before E3. And as long as like no big game that they want to show is having issues, and I bet they'll be able to get it together. That's just my guess, though. Hey, any idea from Bevan Bolton? Hey, any idea if Horizon will still hit this year? I think it will. But you know how it is, 2021. Any of these games could get delayed in a way that we're not expecting. And they haven't even announced that game yet. So if they do delay it, it wouldn't actually be a delay, would it? But my expectation is that they do release it this year. I think that is one of their fall games. It just makes too much sense. That game seems like it should be ready. I think it would be a nice surprise. They didn't need to talk about it when they talked about Forza Motorsport, which is more important to talk about because that game needs a bigger refresh. So making all those big promises, related to it being a next-gen game make more sense. So wouldn't read too much into them showing Motorsport first. That doesn't mean they have to release it first. To me, it just makes a lot of sense. And if it's ready, they'll ship it. From Shadow Rider 94, is EA bringing Night boxing back this gen? I think that they'll probably stick to UFC instead of Fight Night. They might do one Fight Night, but it's that stuff's really, it ebbs and flows with the popularity of the fighters. And the most popular fighters are in the UFC right now. And if like a big fight happens in boxing and gets a lot of attention, and there's like someone to the level of like a Conor McGregor in boxing, which I know Conor McGregor does some boxing, you could probably get him in there and help with that. But why wouldn't you just do a UFC game? Especially since you're already making UFC games. So I haven't heard anything about a boxing game. Like I heard about them making a golf game, and that panned out. And when I said they were working on that, but I haven't heard they're working on a boxing game. So I would assume that is unlikely. All right. From Parmesan, now that Mario is dead, we see Waluigi take his rightful place in the spotlight. Yes. It's a very good point. All right, let's see. I'm scrolling through here from, here's another one from Riser. What do you think Phil Spencer was hinting at by placing Oh, no, I'm sorry. I read this one. My bad. From Killzax, you said Battlefield could be on Game Pass. That seems weird when EA Play exists. Wouldn't EA want to take care of their own audience more than Game Pass? I think that if they did that, they would probably also make it part of EA Play. But I mean, it will be on EA Play, like premium, the higher tier one. All EA games release day and date on the higher tier of EA Play on PC. On console, they don't do that same thing. But I suppose maybe that's what they do is like if maybe Microsoft pays them to enable them to do that. But that's kind of always the way it worked. I mean, the difference is that they're not going to get extra money out of their subscribers if they put it on EA Play up front. But if they do it with Microsoft will pay them a lot of money. Now, I understand your point that like shouldn't EA be looking at taking care of subscribers? My guess is that these companies that have their own subscription services are very much understanding that they are going to have to work within the framework of Game Pass in the future. That people are only going to subscribe to so many of these services, and maybe you'll have another Game Pass one somewhere else that you can work with as well. But the idea of someone just subscribing to EA Play is probably going to be an idea that doesn't last very long beyond this year. And because these companies just not compete in terms of getting content with Microsoft, and Microsoft is willing to work with them to give them what they need to build it into Game Pass Ultimate. And those two factors is going to make EA Play seem like a weird thing to do on its own. And so that doesn't look great. I don't know if EA is necessarily going to care because they understand what's going to happen with EA Play in the long run. But that's just my take on it. All right. Let me scroll down and see if I get a couple more recent ones, and then we'll wrap this up. God, I'm seeing the same questions over. I must be like messing up my chat window here. Okay, so if you have a question you want answered, I just scrolled to the bottom, and you already asked it. Feel free to ask it again right now. I'll try to answer a couple more, and then I'll wrap up. Let's see. From Art B, new Nintendo conspiracy. Sarah Bond, who's in charge of Game Pass, just had a Switch on her shelf at GameStack Live. Yeah, she's like in charge of like the whole Xbox platform, right? I can't remember exactly what that is. So with the Nintendo Xbox stuff, I think that people have been trying to say what they think it is, and if it was Game Pass on Switch, people would have just been saying that. I don't think it's exactly how it's going to turn out. If it does happen, it's going to be just Microsoft games. I think that it will take some time. I think it's much more likely that Microsoft and Nintendo are going to work together in terms of global publishing efforts and Azure and cloud stuff, and that and stuff that Microsoft is good at beyond gaming. Nintendo could work with them on that, and if Microsoft wants to get in certain markets where Nintendo's strong and Microsoft is weak, Nintendo could help with that. They could sort of scratch each other's back a little bit, make a strong partnership, and have it not really interfere with their core gaming businesses at all. But that doesn't mean Game Pass will never come to Switch. I think that that's going to be a much longer process to actually make that make sense. I don't think there's no other third-party subscription service on Switch right now. Like the EA Play and Ubisoft Plus stuff isn't on there, right? So Nintendo hasn't sort of relented on that with anyone yet. So Microsoft being the first, I think it could happen. It'll just take time. It would have to just be Microsoft games. And that's all possible, but I just don't expect that to happen anytime soon. All right, so we got a few more questions since I put out the call there at the end. From Wolf Fox, Konami, Metal Gear Solid, right? Oh, no, it's just, I answered that question. Let's see here. So from Killzax, when will new consoles be easily purchasable? I want an Xbox Series X this fall. 2022. Late 2022, maybe easily purchasable. Maybe 2023. This chip shortage is going to last. I think TSMC said that they expect the chip shortage to last until 2023. Things will get easier, but they won't. It's not going to be easy. Walk in, be able to get any console you want. You'll have time to think about it. It's sitting there on the shelf in front of you. It's not going to be like that until 2023, probably, realistically. There could be surges where they are able to get a lot of supply out at once, and that might happen in the fall. And so there might be periods where it's a little bit easier, but then demand will be higher because it's the fall. We're going into the holidays. And so my expectation is that just do the work. If you really want a console, you're going to have to do the work of following people. Go, YouTuber Jake Randall. He can help you get one. Go. He does his live streams. Follow him. Listen to stuff. And if you do the work of hitting the pavement, trying to buy these systems online, and follow his advice, you should be able to get one within the next month or so. I think that's realistic. But it's all about just following the tricks and knowing what to do and actually putting in the effort. And I was like, I don't have a Series X at the moment. I gave mine to my to my nephew. I was going to buy my own, and I've not been able to do that. But I feel like if I would actually sit down and try to do the work, excuse me, my voice is going. If I would try to sit down and do the work, then I would probably be able to get it. I already had one. I have the PC, and when certain stuff, I still have the Xbox Series S as well. I've been playing on that a lot. I've been just kind of almost just fine, especially because I'm mostly playing on the 1080p TV over here. And so I'm like, yeah, I would love to have my Xbox Series X back. I'm gonna need one eventually, but I'm doing fine without it. So when something pops up, I try. But when I start encountering you have it in your cart and it's on Best Buy or whatever, just wait for this button to turn yellow. My attention sort of drifts because I'm like, I don't want to sort of waste my time doing this. But that's just me. If I had a little bit more patience, I almost assuredly would have succeed by now in Xbox Series X. Which, speaking of which, if anyone has an extra one and they want to sell me, let me know. I'll buy it from you. Okay. My voice is going, so I should wrap this up. Thank you everybody so much for the questions and the attention here. It's really nice. It means a lot. Let's do a couple more call outs here. Montaigne, thank you for your Prime subscription. Maple Miyazaki, thank you for your one subscription. It means a lot, both of you doing that. It's just nice to see people supporting the channel. It's great. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap up the YouTube video. Let's say goodbye. Chad, if you want to say goodbye to YouTube, now's the time to do it. Thank you for watching YouTube. I'll be back with another new video on Tuesday for sure. I think I'm going to try to do these definitely on Tuesday. If news breaks between the Tuesdays, I will do a special show and talk about stuff then, especially if I don't get a chance to talk about it on the podcast. And so, yeah, that's going to be the format going forward. If people like these, I might start doing them more frequently. If it starts making more sense, I might do them more frequently, especially if I can have days where I can wake up early and do it like this. This worked out really well for me today. All right, YouTube, thanks for watching. We're going to get out of here. Have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.